Cam here from Xano Support, and today I'm very excited to be going over Xano Actions. It's the next generation of Xano development. Plug and play, essentially. You can go ahead and start creating and sharing your actions, which are essentially blocks of code without an account and with zero dependencies, so it can be used in any workspace. You can go ahead and also fork these actions and further iterate upon them. So whether you're connecting the internet together or just simply formatting or manipulating data, let's go ahead and explore actions because they're going to go ahead and change the way that you view how you develop inside Xano. If you head with me to xano.com/actions, you'll be met with this landing page where you can discover our Xano actions that exist. You can help create them, and you can also install them. On the left-hand side, you have your Actions button, which is going to be a collection of all your actions. And then you have your projects, which are essentially centralized folders for your actions, where it's also a place where you can collaborate with other users. You have this blue Create Action button in the top left as well in the center, and you can go ahead and get started simply by just clicking on it. Now, if you're new to Xano, this is how we manipulate our data. We have inputs, we pass them into our function stack to manipulate them, and then we return them in the response so we can then use them further in our application. I also want to keep in mind that our actions here are going to be used across different workspaces here, where the action you're creating now is going to be the central source of truth. Being that we want to use it across different workspaces, this is dependency-free, meaning there aren't any database executions or actions here, and this is really just for either manipulating your data or connecting the internet together. So in this case, let's imagine a scenario where in your application or across your applications, you often have to deal with users submitting their first and last name, but doing so maybe without capitalization. And you also just want an easy way to concatenate these values so that you can use them, well, again and again. What this looks like here in the Xano action is we'll start with our input here, where we'll go ahead and select our text, and we'll say it's our first name. We'll select the data structure of single. The value, we won't allow any nullables, and there's no default, and we will say it's required. We do have the ability to go over sensitive data and hide this from our request history, and we can also set a settings registry. Our settings registry is going to be explored in just a little bit, but the idea here is that you have your environment variables in your workspace. Well, in a place or in an action, because there aren't any dependencies, we needed to create essentially those environment variables. Now, we separate it into two separate sections. That is, we have our inputs, and then we also have our sensitive data. Again, we'll explore this in just a little bit here. We won't need to select that for our input, and we will keep that trim filter active so we just get rid of any of that white space. We'll add a new text input, and we'll call this last name, and we'll keep the values the same. Now, inside our function stack, we'll create a variable here. And again, just want to note this is free of dependencies, so those database operations just don't exist. But what we're going to be doing here is creating a variable. And our variable name, we'll go ahead and give it the name of full name. And for our value, our first value will simply just be the input of our first name. We'll add that filter and select text and concatenate this because we're going to be concatenating our first name with our last name. And as a separator, we'll be adding a space. We'll click update, and before we're done, we do want to capitalize it. So we'll click that add filter again. We'll navigate to text again and select capitalize. Here we have our capitalize, and finally, we can click save. As we click save, note that when we added this variable here, it has the name of x1, and it is automatically going to be returned in the response. So we're just going to go ahead and update those variables, and you'll see here it's updated both in our function stack and in a response, so we can test this without having to change anything. We'll open up our run and debug and add cam, and then my last name, again, lowercase here, and select run, where we're then met with our concatenated first and last name, and it is capitalized. So the idea here is that now we're done with our action, and we want to use it in our Xano project. The way that we do that is simply by publishing. Now, of course, we are going to need an account to do just that, so we'll go ahead and log into my Xano account. So now that we're logged in, we have access to that publish button. We'll go ahead and click it, and it's automatically going to assign it to our project. This is created when we create an action, so it's just your name, project, and then we'll go ahead and add the name. We'll call it data sanitization. We'll then also add the description or the publish message, which is this action concatenates the first and last name together, capitalizing it before it's returned. We then have the ability to select whether it's public, for everybody, private, or you do need to go ahead and be allowed on that workspace to be able to see it, or unlist it just for yourself. We'll go ahead and select that category of utility. Note we have several different options here, and then our URL slug, which is going to help with SEO purposes so that your action can be found. We'll just simply call this data format for now. You also have a video URL, so in the event that you are recording a walkthrough or a tutorial, just include that video URL here, and any user who's going to be accessing your action can reference that. But we'll go ahead and simply just click this publish action. I think everything looks good here. And now, once that's done, it's reloaded. We can see an action summary on the right-hand side as latest release and a button to add it to our workspace. We'll select the instance we want to, and then the workspace in which we want that action to exist, and we'll select close. Now what we have the ability to do is navigate to our Xano workspace where we just added that action. So now inside Xano, we have the ability to go ahead and actually, see our actions and use our actions. So first off, let's just see where they exist. If we select on library, you'll see a new option, actions. This didn't exist before you interacted with xano.com/actions. You need to create and add an action to your workspace to be able to see this. We'll click it open and see that this is what we had just created. Now, let's say, of course, we want to use this action. We'll create a function for this specifically, and we'll call this data format just for now. And we'll go ahead and click save. So once we have our function stack here, all we have to do is simply click add a function, scroll down to this actions, and select the action that we want, and it inserts just as a function would. So it has its inputs here, our first name and last name that you can make dynamic, or you can of course hard code, and then the settings registry. Again, we'll get to that in just a second. But for our first name, we'll go ahead and, just as an example, hard code our first and last, and we'll go ahead and run it. Again, we're going to return the action1 response. And when we do so, we can see that that full name is concatenated and capitalized. So hopefully you can see here how powerful these actions can be, where it's just going to be represented as a single function here that you can pass your inputs into. You don't really need to worry about that business logic. It's already been created and it exists at xano.com/actions as that point of truth. Now, what if you want to make changes to it? So once we're back inside xano.com/actions, let's actually head back to our home. Now, let's say we want to make some changes to that action that we had created, but perhaps we don't want to modify the original one. Our users are currently using that and they enjoy it. Maybe we want to offer a V2. Now, what that looks like and what we call that is forking. Here on our home, we can go ahead and see which items have been forked by this icon here. I'm going to go ahead and fork the HubSpot create deal here. I'll click on that button, and then I'll click that clone. It's going to select the initial project, it's going to give it a name, and it's going to keep all the description and everything else the same. We'll click that clone action button, and then we're brought to that actions function stack. This is particularly powerful because, again, you have the ability to make any changes and modifications you want without affecting the original source of truth. Whether that's maybe adding scoped functions, or what we had called custom functions in the Xano workspace, but scoped functions in the Xano actions, or maybe that's adding registry keys or something maybe a little bit more complicated in your business logic. Now, keep that in mind. This is the registry key. What that looks like here is, well, once we select it, we have a blue highlight on our input, which just represents, again, that this might be sensitive data and that we want to separate it from our regular inputs. Let's go ahead and add this to our workspace. We'll again select our instance, and again, we'll go ahead and select our workspace. Once it's added, let's head back. Now that we're back inside our Xano workspace, let's go ahead and, for demonstration purposes, just simply disable that sanitization or that format action we created, and let's go ahead and add that one we just cloned. All of the inputs are on our right-hand side, but what's new is our settings registry. Our settings registry here, we have our HubSpot API key, and notice how that silver text says use default. You can select this edit action registry blue button here and set that default value across your workspace. Or you can go ahead and hard code or make this value dynamic, depending on how it's set up and how you'd like to use it. So there you have it, Xano Actions, very, very powerful force to reckon with, and essentially a plug-and-play setup with minimal barrier to entry, extreme accessibility, and hopefully something that expedites your Xano building process and makes the journey just a little bit better. Go ahead and, if you have any comments and questions, leave those in the comment section below. You can always reach out to us within the support chat within your instance on the left-hand side, and of course, within our community. We absolutely love to help answer any questions that we come across, and Actions is going to be something that changes the game. We cannot wait to see what you create.